The open ocean was once a road without signs, crossed by sailors, guided only by stars and sea. This is the story of Starpaths and Shorelines, a daring mission to rebuild an ancient voyage with no modern tools. You will learn the exact steps it takes to navigate thousands of miles using only the knowledge of the past. How did ancient mariners find tiny islands in a vast blue desert? And what does their genius reveal about our own place in the world? This journey uncovers a forgotten chapter of human courage and intellect. What part of the past do you think we have forgotten the most? Long before satellites charted the sea, ancient mariners faced a horizon that promised both wonder and terror. They belonged to cultures shaped by the ocean's immense power, from the Polynesian voyagers who settled the Pacific to the Viking explorers who raided distant coasts and the Phoenician traders who forged routes across the Mediterranean. What drove these people to cast off from sight of land? It was not a single reason, but a powerful mix of human ambition. Some sought wealth through trade, carrying precious goods across vast distances. Others were pushed by population pressures or pulled by the stories of new lands waiting beyond the waves. And for some, it was a deep, innate curiosity, a need to see what lay over the edge of the world. These journeys were monumental acts of courage. They ventured into the blue unknown with nothing but wooden boats, woven sails, and their own hard-won knowledge. There were no engines to fight a calm, no radios to call for help, and no plastic-wrapped rations. Survival depended on a profound understanding of the natural world, a language written in the stars, the swell of the waves, and the flight of birds. To truly appreciate the challenge of rebuilding one of these voyages, we must first understand the mindset of these early sailors. They saw the ocean not as a barrier, but as a path, and they learned to read its subtle signs as clearly as we read a street map. This intimate connection with their environment is the very first piece of the puzzle we are trying to solve. The names Starpaths and Shorelines are not just poetic labels. They are the two fundamental pillars of ancient navigation, a dual system that guided sailors across the featureless ocean and safely back to land. Starpaths is the art of celestial wayfinding. It is the practice of using the sun by day and the moon, stars, and planets by night as a fixed map in the sky. Navigators would memorize the precise rising and setting points of key stars, creating mental highways across the water. They did not just look up, they learned to read the celestial sphere as a perfect, predictable clock and compass combined. Shorelines, on the other hand, is the science of the sea itself. It is the skill of piloting, of using everything the environment offers when you are within the sphere of land. This means observing the subtle patterns of ocean swells as they bend around an unseen island. It means watching for specific species of birds whose flight direction at dawn and dusk points unerringly toward their nesting grounds. It means smelling the scent of particular blossoms on the wind, or seeing the green reflection of a lagoon on the underside of distant clouds. This is not romantic guesswork. It is a rigorous empirical process refined over thousands of years of observation and survival. The Starpaths and Shorelines project is a living history experiment built on this dual methodology. The goal is to take these principles out of the history books and test them in the real world, using a replica vessel and only the tools and knowledge available in a specific historical period. It is about bridging the immense gap between what we think ancient sailors could do and proving what they actually did. With these two pillars defined, the entire journey gains its structure. But a structure needs a destination. The very first critical step is to choose which ancient voyage to bring back to life. Choosing which ancient journey to rebuild is an act of archaeology in itself. It starts not with a map, but with fragments of evidence scattered across time. The team pores over centuries-old texts, deciphers inscriptions on weathered stones, and listens carefully to the oral histories passed down through generations. Each potential voyage presents a unique puzzle. A Polynesian settlement voyage across the Pacific offers a story of incredible endurance and celestial mastery, but the historical records are woven into chants and genealogies rather than written logs. A Viking journey to Iceland is better documented in sagas, yet it demands confronting the brutal cold and unpredictable storms of the North Atlantic. A Phoenician trade route across the Mediterranean might seem less extreme, but it requires unraveling the secrets of a culture that guarded its navigational knowledge as a state secret. The selection is a delicate balance. The voyage must be historically significant, a journey that truly mattered, but it also must be one where enough clues survive to make a faithful reconstruction possible. What kind of ship was used? What specific tools did the navigators carry? Are there records, even cryptic ones, that describe how they read the waves or the stars? This choice becomes the project's DNA. It dictates every single detail that follows, from the type of wood used in the ship's hull to the very skills the modern crew must spend years learning. The right voyage gives the mission its soul and its historical weight, transforming it from a simple adventure into a genuine conversation with the past. And once that destination is finally chosen, the next monumental task begins, building the vessel that will carry the crew across the sea. Building the vessel is a form of time travel in wood and fiber. This second step transforms historical research into a physical reality, a ship that must not only look the part but sail the part. It is the project's greatest tangible challenge, moving from abstract concepts to a living, breathing craft that will face the open ocean. This is not about creating a modern yacht with an antique appearance. It demands an obsessive commitment to authenticity, using only the materials, tools, and construction methods of the chosen era. For a Polynesian voyaging canoe, this means selecting specific trees for the hulls, shaping them with stone adzes, and lashing the entire structure together with miles of hand-braided coconut rope without a single metal nail. For a Viking longship, it involves the clinker-built technique, where overlapping planks are riveted together, creating a hull that is both strong and remarkably flexible, able to ride over North Atlantic waves rather than plow through them. Every single choice is a question posed to the past. What type of wood provides the right balance of strength and buoyancy? How was the sail woven, and what was its exact shape to best capture the wind? The answers come from a unique collaboration between historians who study old texts and ship fragments, archaeologists who analyze the remains of sunken vessels, and traditional shipwrights who still practice these near-forgotten crafts. The launch of this reconstructed vessel is the first true test. How does it handle in a following sea? How quickly can it tack against the wind? Its performance on the water is the first critical piece of data, revealing whether our modern understanding of ancient technology is correct. A perfect replica that sinks in a moderate swell is a failure of interpretation, not of the original design. This ship becomes a floating laboratory, and its seaworthiness is the non-negotiable foundation upon which the entire daring voyage depends. With the hull taking shape, the focus shifts from the vessel itself to the intricate devices that will guide it across thousands of miles of open water. The ship is a body, but these ancient tools are its eyes and its mind. While the hull takes shape in the shipyard, a parallel transformation happens within the crew, a process of learning to see the world as their ancestors did. This third step, sourcing and mastering period navigation tools, is a journey into a different kind of craftsmanship, one of mental discipline and sensory acuity. It begins with the physical artifacts, the simple yet profound instruments that translate the vastness of the sky into actionable data. There is the camel, a small wooden rectangle with a string. By holding it at arm's length and aligning the top and bottom with a specific star and the horizon, a navigator can measure the star's angle, a crude but effective way to gauge latitude. There is the cross staff, a more advanced version of the same principle, and then there are the more enigmatic tools like the sunstone, a piece of crystal-like Iceland spar that could polarize light, potentially revealing the sun's position even through a thick layer of cloud. For the Polynesian wayfinder, the most vital tool is not held in the hand but held in the memory, the star compass. This is not a physical object but a mental map of the entire celestial dome, divided into 32 houses, each marking the rising and setting point of a key star. The navigator sits at the center of this invisible compass, feeling the vessel move beneath them as the star paths wheel overhead. Mastering these devices is nothing like learning to use a modern instrument. A GPS gives you a position with robotic certainty. A magnetic compass always points north. These ancient tools offer whispers, not shouts. They require interpretation. Using a camel on a heaving deck in the middle of the night is an exercise in profound patience and physical stability. The angle you measure is only as good as your ability to hold the tool steady against the roll of the sea. Learning the star compass is a feat of memory and spatial reasoning that can take years, requiring the navigator to constantly update their mental model as they sail, as the star that was your guidepost at dusk has set by midnight, replaced by another rising in the east. This long and arduous training is as much about developing a sailor's intuition as it is about technical skill. It is about learning to trust the subtle feedback from a piece of wood and a string, to feel the truth in the star's positions even when doubt creeps in. This mastery transforms abstract knowledge from old texts into a practical, life-saving ability. It turns a historian into a navigator, and with these tools finally in hand, both physical and mental, the crew must now learn to read the greatest and most detailed map of all, the ever-turning vault of the night sky. The night sky is a map that never stays still. Celestial navigation is the art of reading this moving chart, using specific stars as fixed points on a vast, rotating dome. A navigator does not simply sail toward a star. Instead, they follow a star path, aligning their vessel with the precise point on the horizon where a key star, like Sirius or one of the points of the Southern Cross, rises or sets. That spot on the horizon becomes their steering mark, a beacon to hold a constant course through the hours of darkness. When that guiding star finally dips below the horizon or moves too far across the sky, the navigator seamlessly transfers their focus to the next star rising in the east, hopping from one celestial landmark to the next across the heavens. This constant observation is fused with the discipline of dead reckoning. It is a continuous calculation of position based on the best estimate of speed, the direction held, and the time spent traveling from the last known point. The navigator must feel the push of the current against the hull, judge the boat's speed by the sound of water parting at the bow, and track the passage of time not with a clock, but by the slow, majestic wheel of the constellations. Every wave, every shift in the wind is a variable in this endless mental equation. This process is brutally demanding. A single night of overcast can blot out the entire star map, forcing the navigator to rely solely on their dead reckoning and their feel for the ocean swells for days on end. There is another, more subtle challenge: the precession of the stars. Over centuries, the Earth's wobble on its axis slowly shifts the positions of the celestial poles and the rising points of all the stars. A star that was a perfect guide for a Viking navigator 1,000 years ago would be in a slightly different position today. The modern crew must work with astronomers to mathematically wind back the clock, calculating exactly where those ancient guideposts would have been in the sky during the era of their chosen voyage. This skill transforms the celestial sphere into a reliable, rotating clock and map, but the sky is only half the story. We must also learn to read the messages written on the water and in the air. While the stars provide a map for the great ocean crossings, the final approach to land demands a different kind of sight. Piloting is the art of reading the shorelines and the sea itself, a skill that turns the ocean from a blank expanse into a page filled with signs. It begins with the horizon, where a skilled eye learns to distinguish a low-lying atoll from a cloud bank by its sharper, more stable outline and its distinctive greenish reflection on the underside of the clouds above it. This is not a vague impression, but a specific, observable phenomenon caused by the light reflecting off the shallow, turquoise waters of a lagoon. As you draw closer, the behavior of seabirds becomes a living compass. Terns and boobies will fly out to sea at dawn to fish and return to their nests on land at dusk. By observing their flight paths in the morning and evening, a navigator can draw a mental line straight back to an island still invisible over the curve of the Earth. The ocean swells themselves become a tactile map. Long, regular waves generated by distant weather systems act like underwater mountain ranges. When these swells encounter the submerged slopes of an island, they bend around it, a process known as refraction. An experienced navigator, often lying down in the canoe to feel the vessel's motion more purely, can detect these subtle interference patterns through the hull. The boat might develop a slight, rhythmic roll as it crosses the confused sea where two refracted swell patterns meet, signaling land dozens of miles away. Changes in watercolor reveal the depth and composition of the seafloor, while specific types of seaweed or driftwood can hint at the types of landmasses upcurrent. This knowledge is deeply regional, passed down through chants and stories, a sensory library specific to an ocean basin. Mastering piloting is what transforms a successful voyage from a journey across the ocean into a safe arrival at a specific tiny dot of land. It is the final, critical link in the chain, proving that the star paths lead not just to a general region, but to a home. And beneath both the star paths and the shore signs flows a deeper, more powerful force, the great river of the sea that can either carry you to your destination or sweep you far into the void. The ocean holds rivers of immense power, flowing silently beneath the surface. Ancient sailors did not merely endure these currents, they learned to ride them as a traveler might ride a swift horse, turning a potential obstacle into a powerful ally. The sixth step in rebuilding an ancient voyage is to understand and utilize these great conveyor belts of the sea. Ocean currents are like vast, flowing rivers within the sea, and ancient navigators learned to use them to their advantage. This is not a passive process. It requires actively studying both historical clues and modern oceanographic data to map the major current systems that would have been available. For a voyage tracing the Viking route to Iceland, this means understanding the North Atlantic Drift, a relatively warm current that acted as a maritime highway toward northern lands. For a Polynesian crossing, it involves mastering the complex web of equatorial currents and countercurrents that crisscross the Pacific, currents that could carry a voyaging canoe toward new islands or sweep it into a lifeless void if misread. How does a crew on a replica vessel without modern sensors even detect these invisible forces? They learn to read the sea's subtle language. A sudden change in water temperature, felt by hand or noted by a simple floating thermometer, can signal the boundary between two great masses of moving water. The surface texture of the ocean changes, becoming smoother or developing a distinctive, oily sheen in a strong current. Most importantly, they must constantly monitor the vessel's drift. By observing the angle between the direction the boat is pointing and its actual track across the water, a navigator can feel the current's push, a constant, silent hand guiding or resisting their progress. Using a current properly can slice days off a long journey, granting the gift of speed with minimal effort. Fighting against a relentless current, however, is an exhausting and often futile battle that can drain a crew's strength and consume precious fresh water. This sophisticated understanding of oceanography was not born in a laboratory, but was forged through centuries of observation and tragic experience. A deep ecological knowledge written in the success of settlements and the silent stories of those who never returned. Harnessing this power is a final testament to the ancient mariner's genius. Now, all of this accumulated knowledge, the ship, the tools, the star paths, the shore signs, and the currents, must be fused together in the most critical element of all, the human crew. A ship and its tools are useless without the human hands and minds that bring them to life. This seventh step, assembling and training the modern crew, is where the entire project transforms from a historical concept into a living, breathing reality. A mission of this scale demands a unique blend of expertise, forming a team that is part research group, part athletic team, and part family. At its heart is the master navigator, an individual who has dedicated years, often decades, to learning the specific star paths and piloting techniques of the chosen culture. This person is the project's living brain, the one who will carry the mental map of the entire journey. They are supported by sailors who are not just strong, but deeply intuitive, skilled in handling the idiosyncrasies of a vessel with no wheel, no engine, and no backup. They must be able to read the wind in the sails and feel the current in the tiller, responding to the sea's language with an almost instinctual understanding. Alongside them are the historians and documentarians, the keepers of context. Their role is to observe, record, and interpret, ensuring that every action and decision is filtered through the lens of historical authenticity, and that the story of the voyage is preserved for others. Physical and psychological preparation is as critical as any navigational chart. The crew will face weeks or even months of extreme isolation, constant physical discomfort, and the relentless mental strain of being responsible for each other's lives with no hope of a quick rescue. Training for this involves more than just learning to tie knots. It demands long, grueling practice voyages on the replica vessel, forcing the team to confront the realities of life at sea. They practice emergency drills until they become muscle memory, learning how to repair a torn sail in a gale or bail a flooded hull in complete synchronization. Team building is not a corporate exercise but a matter of survival. The crew must learn to communicate without words, to anticipate each other's needs, and to resolve tensions before they fester in the confined space of the boat. This intense preparation is fused with a deep immersion in the historical mindset. They study the chants, the stories, and the spiritual beliefs of the ancient mariners they represent, not as a performance, but to understand the worldview that gave them the courage to sail into the unknown. This human element is the true engine of the endeavor, a fragile convergence of knowledge, skill, and profound trust. With a crew forged in this crucible of preparation, the final intellectual challenge can begin, plotting a course across an empty ocean using only the knowledge the ancients possessed. This final map is drawn not on paper but in the mind. Charting the course with ancient knowledge is the intellectual culmination of the entire project, the moment when all the research and training fuse into a single, actionable plan. It requires building a mental model of the ocean, a living chart that represents relationships and movements rather than fixed points. For a Polynesian navigator, this might take the form of a stick chart, an intricate web of palm ribs and cowrie shells. But these objects are not maps as we understand them. The shells do not represent islands to scale, and the curved sticks do not trace coastlines. Instead, they model the ocean's dynamics, mapping the patterns of swells as they wrap around an atoll and the interference zones where different wave trains meet. This is a chart of energy, not of land. The planned route is a sequence of events, not a line. It begins with the departure, timed to catch a specific current. It proceeds by following a succession of star paths, holding the vessel steady under the rising point of one guiding star after another. The ultimate target is not a dot with a name, but a celestial address, the sail down point. This is the specific star under which the destination island lies. When that star is directly overhead at its zenith, you have arrived. There are no lines of longitude or latitude in this system. Your position is always relational, defined by your angle to a star, your alignment with a swell, and your memory of the last known land. This demands a radical shift from our modern obsession with precision. We are accustomed to a dot on a screen that says, "You are here." Ancient navigation says you are on the path, moving in relation to the heavens. It is a fluid, dynamic understanding of space, where you are a point in motion within a great turning sphere. This carefully constructed course is, in the end, a grand hypothesis. It is the team's best guess based on years of study about how the original voyage was achieved. The real test does not happen in the library or the shipyard. It begins the moment the last line is cast off and the shore recedes behind you, committing the fate of the ship and its crew to the truth of the old ways. The moment the last line is cast off, history ceases to be a theory. It becomes the deck beneath your feet and the vast, empty horizon ahead. This departure is a severance, a deliberate step from the world of certainty into a realm governed by wind and wave. Before the shore even fades, the crew performs the rites of their chosen tradition. It might be a chant for the Polynesian god of the sea, or an offering cast into the water for a Viking deity, a solemn plea for safe passage. These are not empty rituals, but a psychological grounding, a way to acknowledge the immense power of the ocean and the humility required to cross it. The vessel itself is a floating larder of the past, loaded with food that would not be out of place centuries ago, dried fish and hardtack, fruit preserved in honey, and all the fresh water held in clay pots or hollowed gourds, each drop measured and precious. As the familiar coastline shrinks to a thin, green line and then vanishes entirely, a profound silence often falls over the crew. The hum of the modern world is gone, replaced by the creak of wood and the rush of water. There is no going back. Every skill they have practiced for years must now work in concert. The navigator takes the first bearing, aligning the vessel with a specific star's rising point, while others begin the endless rhythm of checking the sail and feeling for the current's pull. This transition is the Voyage's first true test, a mental leap as significant as any physical one. The safety net is gone. From this point forward, their world is defined by the celestial dome above and the endless blue desert below, a space where ancient wisdom is the only map that matters. The first 24 hours at sea feel like an eternity. With the final sight of land swallowed by the horizon, the world collapses into a small, self-contained universe of wood, water, and sky. This is the first open ocean leg, a psychological frontier where every theory and practiced skill must now hold firm against the immense, featureless blue. The navigator enters a state of hypervigilance, a relentless cycle that structures the endless days. At the crack of dawn, they measure the angle of the sun with the camel, establishing a fresh data point. At dusk, as the first stars pierce the twilight, they do it again, aligning the vessel with a new celestial guide. Throughout the night, this dance continues, a silent communion with the turning heavens, constantly updating the mental model of their position. There is no dot on a screen to offer reassurance, only the slow, cumulative trust in the star paths overhead. The rest of the crew learns a different language, the tactile tongue of the sea itself. They become extensions of the boat, their hands always on the lines, constantly tweaking the set of the sail to catch every whisper of the wind. The person at the steering oar does not just hold a course, they feel it, their body sensing the subtle push of a cross-current or a shift in the swell pattern, making infinitesimal corrections that keep the vessel true. This leg is a profound test of faith, not in a deity but in a system. For days, sometimes weeks, there is nothing to validate their progress. The ocean offers no landmarks, no signs that say you are getting closer. Doubt is a constant, quiet passenger. Is the current stronger than we calculated? Did that squall last night push us off course? The navigator's unshakable confidence becomes the crew's anchor, the one fixed point in a shifting world. Boredom and fatigue are relentless enemies. The monotony of the watch cycle, the physical discomfort of a wet bunk, and the mental strain of constant vigilance wear down even the most resilient spirits. It is in these moments that the crew's training and bonding prove their worth, as they learn to support one another, to find small moments of humor, and to focus on the shared, singular goal. Successfully navigating this first long stretch, arriving at a point in the ocean where the piloting signs are expected to begin, is a triumph that cannot be overstated. It forges a deep, unspoken confidence in the methods of the past, proving that the star paths are not just stories, but a reliable, living science. This hard-won trust in the heavens now sharpens the senses for the next phase of the journey, watching for the subtle, earthly clues that will guide us home. The first sign is often not seen but felt. A subtle, rhythmic shudder runs through the hull, a faint tremor in the steering oar. The navigator, who has been feeling the ocean's pulse for days, notices the change immediately. The long, regular swells from the southeast are now meeting another, weaker set of waves, creating a confused, choppy intersection in the open sea. This is refraction in action, the great underwater mountain range of a distant island bending the ocean's energy. The crew gathers, not with excitement but with quiet intensity. They lie on the deck, hands pressed against the wood, closing their eyes to better feel the vessel's new, complex motion. This is the first whisper from the shore, a confirmation that their star path has led them true. Hours later, the lookout spots a single white turn, its flight purposeful and direct, heading west at dawn. This is not a bird fishing at random, it is commuting. Its path is a dotted line on a map only they can see, pointing toward a roost that must lie somewhere over that empty horizon. The mood on board shifts from focused endurance to electric anticipation. Every pair of eyes becomes a sensor. One person notes a faint greenish tint on the underside of a distant cumulus cloud, the signature reflection of a shallow lagoon. Another spots a particular piece of driftwood, a type of tree that only grows on volcanic islands. Each sign alone could be a coincidence, a trick of the light, or a stray piece of flotsam. But together they form a converging web of evidence. The crew debates each observation, a collective brain sifting through the data. Is that truly a land cloud or just a particularly thick buildup? The navigator weighs all the inputs, cross-referencing the swell patterns with the bird behavior and the cloud formations. When these independent clues all point to the same patch of ocean, the hypothesis becomes a certainty. Land is there. The thrill of that moment is more than just relief. It is a profound intellectual and emotional victory. It is the joy of a puzzle solved, of a language once forgotten now spoken fluently. These small, hard-won validations are the fuel that powers the crew through the final, most anxious leg of the journey. Each decoded sign is a conversation with the ancients, a shared nod across centuries that says, "We see what you saw." And as the ship moves deeper into this zone of signs, the sky itself begins to tell a new story, one written in the ever-changing patterns of wind and water that test the crew's resilience in an entirely different way. The sky speaks a language of shape and color long before the storm arrives. Ancient voyagers were fluent in this tongue, their survival hinging on an intimate, generational knowledge of seasonal patterns and weather signs. This 12th step moves beyond navigation into the art of meteorological prophecy, reading the intentions of the wind and sea. They did not simply endure weather, they danced with it, timing their epic voyages to harness the great seasonal engines like the reliable trade winds or the reversing monsoon cycles. For the crew of the replica vessel, this means observing the world with a hunter's intensity. A halo around the moon is not just a beautiful phenomenon, it is a warning of ice crystals high in the atmosphere, often signaling an approaching warm front and worsening weather within the next day. A sudden drop in barometric pressure, felt in the ears or noted by a simple, period-appropriate mercury glass tube, is an urgent message from the sky. The sea itself offers its own warnings. A long, swelling ground roll from a distant quarter, a change in the water's color, or the appearance of certain types of clouds, like the mare's tails that precede a major system, all form a coherent forecast written on the elements. This knowledge demands immediate, decisive action. Seeing the telltale greenish cast to a thunderhead on the horizon, the crew does not wait. They spring into a well-rehearsed ballet of seamanship, scrambling to lower and reef the great woven sail, securing every loose item on deck, and perhaps even changing course to present the vessel's most resilient angle to the coming blow. There are no satellite images, no storm warnings buzzing on a phone. Their only data is the feel of the air and the look of the water, and their only safety lies in the correctness of their interpretation. When the storm finally hits, it is the ultimate validation of every preceding step. The vessel's authentic design is tested not in a calm sea, but in a howling gale. Does the lashed hull flex and absorb the shock of the waves as the ancient designs intended? Does the steering oar remain responsive under a torrent of green water? The crew's trust in their ship and their training is forged in this fury. Successfully riding out a tempest using only period techniques is a profound victory, a raw, physical conversation with the past that proves the resilience of both the technology and the human spirit. Yet surviving the storm is only half the battle. The true, grinding challenge begins in the exhausted calm that follows, as the crew must now confront the slow, silent erosion of their own bodies and minds. The body and mind have their own currents, and they can turn against you faster than any storm. Sustaining the crew is a logistical battle fought on two fronts, the physical and the psychological, with only the resources of the past as your arsenal. The ship's larder is a time capsule of sustenance, stocked with foods that could survive months at sea without refrigeration. Hardtack, a tooth-breaking biscuit made of flour and water, forms the unyielding backbone of the diet, supplemented by dried, salted fish and meat. Every single bite and sip is measured against the relentless calendar of the voyage. Fresh water is the most precious cargo, stored in clay amphorae or sealed gourds, its level a source of constant, low-grade anxiety. Rainfall becomes a celebrated event, with every available sail and container deployed to catch the life-giving downpour, a practice as vital today as it was for ancient Phoenician traders. But survival is more than just calories and hydration, it is about health. The ghost of scurvy, the sailor's ancient scourge, is an ever-present threat. Without modern vitamins, the crew turns to the empirical wisdom of their predecessors. They might consume a daily ration of a specific fermented food, like a sauerkraut, or carefully eat the raw livers of freshly caught fish, both traditional sources of the vital vitamin C that staves off the debilitating disease. An injury, a simple infected cut or a broken bone, becomes a monumental crisis. There is no helicopter evacuation, no antibiotic. Treatment relies on a carefully curated kit of herbal poultices, knowledge of bone setting, and a sober acceptance of the risks. Alongside this physical maintenance is the delicate task of tending to the human spirit. Monotony and isolation are silent enemies. The crew fights back with rigid routines that give structure to the endless days, with shared meals that are as much about camaraderie as nutrition, and with the ancient art of storytelling under the stars. These are not frivolous pastimes, they are essential rituals that reinforce identity, relieve tension, and keep despair at bay. The success of the entire voyage hinges on this fragile balance, on keeping both body and mind resilient enough to endure the journey's final, most demanding act, the tense approach to a landfall that must be perfectly judged. The final approach is a tightening spiral of attention, a gradual narrowing of the world from the boundless ocean to a single, hoped-for point of land. Every sense is stretched to its limit, filtering the environment for the faintest clue. The navigator's mental chart becomes a living document, constantly updated. The star path has given them a general address, a vast circle of probability on the ocean surface. Now, the piloting signs must shrink that circle from dozens of miles across to a few. They watch for a cloud that does not move with the others, a stationary bank anchored by the warm, rising air of an island. They inhale deeply with the changing breeze, searching for the faint, sweet scent of flowering plants or the smoky aroma of a cooking fire, odors that can travel incredible distances over water. The ultimate celestial confirmation comes with the zenith star. The crew sails on, their eyes fixed overhead, until the specific star they have been following for weeks, the one under which their destination supposedly lies, reaches its highest point in the sky, directly above the mast. In that moment, the theory of the star compass becomes a physical reality. You are, by definition, there, yet the ocean below remains an unbroken expanse of blue. This is the most psychologically demanding phase of the entire voyage. The data says you have arrived, but your eyes see nothing. A small error compounded over weeks, a current misjudged by half a knot, could mean the island is still 10, 20, or 50 miles away. The strategy now shifts to a search pattern, often a great, expanding square or a series of carefully calculated sweeps. The boat turns, sailing leg after leg, each pair of eyes scanning the horizon until they ache. The tension is a physical weight. This is where faith in the system is tested to its absolute breaking point. The moment of sighting is rarely a dramatic shout. It is often a quiet, hesitant question. Is that a cloud, or is it the dark, solid green of a mountain? The confirmation spreads through the crew not as a cheer, but as a deep, collective exhale, a release of breath held for weeks. That first glimpse of land is more than just a destination reached. It is the final, triumphant answer to a question posed centuries ago, a proof written not on paper, but on the water and in the sky. That faint smudge on the horizon holds its shape. It does not drift or dissolve like a cloud. A single, quiet word passes from the lookout to the navigator, a word charged with the weight of the entire journey. Land, the confirmation ripples through the crew in a wave of silent, overwhelming emotion. There are no shouts, only a collective release of breath, a physical unclenching of muscles held taut for weeks. This is the eureka, a moment, a rush of pure exhilaration fused with a profound, bone-deep relief. In that instant, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, every aching muscle is redeemed. The star paths were true, the shore signs were real, the ancient knowledge held in trust for centuries has guided them across 1,000 miles of open ocean to a pinpoint on the globe. They quickly compare the island's emerging profile to the descriptions memorized from old chants or the few surviving sketches, finding a perfect match in the silhouette of its peaks against the dawn sky. This validation is more than personal triumph. It is a conversation across time, a shared heartbeat with every ancient mariner who ever wept at the sight of a new shore. The mood on board shifts instantly from discovery to execution. The final approach demands a different kind of skill, a slow, careful dance with the land. The navigator, who has been a master of the open ocean, now becomes a coastal pilot, reading the color of the water for the telltale turquoise of shallow reefs and the ominous dark line of a submerged coral head. They search for a break in the surf, a safe channel leading to a sheltered lagoon or a sandy beach. Every decision is deliberate, every hand on the line is focused. The vessel, which has been a home in the wilderness, now feels fragile again as it skirts the razor-sharp coral. When the hull finally grinds gently onto the sand and the crew steps onto solid ground, their legs wobbling with the unfamiliar stability, it marks the end of the oceanic journey. But this landfall is not an ending. It is the beginning of a new phase of understanding, proving with absolute certainty that the voyage was not a fluke or a legend, but a repeatable feat of human intellect and courage. The sand is warm beneath their feet, a strange and solid sensation after weeks of feeling the world move. The first hours on land are a slow, deliberate process of reacquainting themselves with stillness. The crew's immediate priority is to secure the vessel, hauling it safely above the tide line and carefully inspecting the hull for any damage sustained during the final approach. Only when the ship is safe, their home in the wilderness protected, can they truly rest. They drink deeply from a fresh water source, their bodies absorbing the liquid with a gratitude that is almost painful, and they sleep a sleep of utter exhaustion, free from the constant need to stand watch. This physical recovery is just as important as any navigational data. When they wake, their minds clear, they begin the work of assessment. They walk the beach, comparing the shape of the mountains against the horizon to the descriptions held in ancient chants. They search for specific types of stone or unique vegetation mentioned in the oral histories, each matching detail another lock clicking into place, confirming this is not just any island, but the specific one their ancestors aimed for. A ceremony of thanks is often the next natural step, a moment of profound reflection. Whether it is a Polynesian offering of gratitude to the ocean gods or a Norse blot of mead to the gods of wind and wave, this ritual grounds the achievement in its cultural context. It is a recognition that their success was not just a matter of skill, but of partnership with the immense forces of nature. Simultaneously, the scientific work begins. The navigator's final log entries are sealed, recording the last star sites and swell patterns. Every crew member is medically assessed, their physical condition documented as a vital data point on the human cost of such a journey. The ship itself is meticulously photographed and measured, its wear and tear telling a silent story of the stresses it endured. This successful landfall is the triumphant conclusion of the oceanic crossing, the primary objective met in full. Yet, for the ancient mariners they emulate, this was never the end. This beach was a starting line. It was the place where exploration turned to settlement, where trade routes were established, where a new chapter of human history began. For the modern crew, this understanding brings a new and sobering reality. our work is not yet done. To prove this was not a one-way fluke, to fully validate the ancient methods, we must now turn the ship around and face the open ocean once more, proving that the Starpaths are a highway that works in both directions. The return journey begins not with fanfare, but with a deep, sobering breath. The crew stands on the foreign shore, their bodies still humming with the fatigue of the first crossing, and looks out at the same vast ocean they just conquered. This is the Voyage true crucible, a second act that tests the ancient methodology not as a novel experiment, but as a reliable, repeatable system. The navigational puzzle is entirely inverted. The star paths that guided them here are now useless for the return, the constellations that rose ahead of them now set behind. They must construct a new mental map from scratch, identifying a completely different sequence of zenith stars and steering marks that will lead them home. The currents, too, present a reversed equation. The same flow that carried them swiftly toward the island may now be a formidable wall to push against, forcing them to seek out a different, perhaps less favorable, oceanic river for the passage back. Every calculation must be rethought, every environmental sign reinterpreted. This is the proof of robustness. Anyone with a bit of luck might stumble upon a landfall once. But only a truly mastered system can reliably find its way back. The psychological terrain is even more treacherous than the physical one. The intoxicating novelty of discovery has been replaced by the grim reality of a mandatory second crossing. The destination is no longer a mysterious new world, but the familiar home they left behind, a goal that feels simultaneously comforting and impossibly distant. This mental fatigue can be more debilitating than any storm. The crew must dig into reserves of discipline they did not know they had, maintaining their rigorous watch cycles and their hyper-awareness even as their spirits long for rest. Provisions are critically low. The fresh water and food consumed on the outbound leg must be carefully rationed for the return, turning every meal into a reminder of the dwindling calendar. Success on this second leg provides something the first could not, a comparative data set. The team can now analyze two complete journeys along the same route. Did the same swell patterns hold true in both directions? Were the bird species as reliable on the return? How did the star paths differ, and what new techniques had to be invented on the fly? This round-trip completion is the ultimate seal of validation. It transforms a daring one-way adventure into a confirmed two-way highway, proving the ancient mariners did not just cast themselves into the blue hoping for the best. They built a sustainable, repeatable science of the sea. With the ship safely home, the real work of decoding this ocean wisdom can finally begin in earnest. The adventure ends where the science truly begins, back on dry land with a mountain of handwritten logs and a single, secret digital record. That hidden GPS unit, carried silently throughout the entire journey, now holds the unflinching truth of their track across the ocean. Its data is the modern baseline, the objective reality against which every star sighting and swell reading is measured. The process of comparison is meticulous, almost archaeological in its detail. Historians and oceanographers sit together, laying the navigator's daily estimated positions over the crisp, precise line drawn by the satellite. The moments of near-perfect alignment are a quiet thrill, a confirmation that the star compass, when conditions were clear, could guide a vessel with astonishing accuracy. But the analysis also hunts for the errors. It reveals where a consistent misjudgment of current speed, perhaps just half a knot, slowly pushed the vessel off its ideal course over many days. It shows how a single overcast night, forcing reliance on dead reckoning alone, created a kink in their path that took another 2 days to correct. These are not failures but revelations. They expose the real-world tolerances of the system, the precise margins for error that ancient mariners had to build into their mental calculations. This data becomes a powerful key for unlocking older mysteries. By proving the exact capabilities of a Polynesian voyaging canoe or a Viking longship, the team can now re-evaluate grand historical questions. Could a specific migration across the Pacific have been a deliberate, navigated voyage, or was it more likely a desperate drift? How wide a swath of ocean could a Phoenician trader reliably cross and still hit their intended port? The project's logs become a quantitative tool, allowing archaeologists to test their theories against hard performance data. The implications ripple outward, touching modern sailors learning celestial navigation and coastal communities seeking to revive their own traditional seafaring knowledge. This rigorous, unglamorous work in the laboratory and the archive is what separates a romantic reenactment from a genuine contribution to human understanding. It proves that the courage of the crew was matched by the precision of the methods, turning a single journey into a permanent reference point for our shared history. The ocean yields its secrets not in a single moment, but in the quiet patterns that emerge long after the voyage is done. The most profound insight from this entire endeavor is a simple but staggering one. Ancient navigators could achieve an accuracy that borders on the impossible. Over a journey of thousands of miles, their methods could reliably place a vessel within a target zone of just a few dozen miles, a speck on the vast blue canvas. This was not luck. It was the result of a holistic, multi-sensory system where no single sense was relied upon alone. If clouds obscured the stars for a night, the navigator felt the swell. If the current seemed to shift, the flight of birds provided a cross-reference. This constant triangulation of data from the sky, the sea, and the air created a robust and forgiving network of guidance. What a modern navigator might call an error in their dead reckoning was often not a mistake at all, but a planned part of the strategy. Ancient wayfinders understood that the great ocean currents were not obstacles, but moving pathways. A course might deliberately be set to be pushed slightly down current, knowing that the final piloting phase, with its bird signs and refracted swells, would provide a much finer, more precise aiming mechanism than any star ever could. This reveals a mind-bending level of sophistication. They were not just plotting points, they were orchestrating a dynamic interaction with the living ocean. This forced a fundamental reevaluation of their capabilities. These voyages can no longer be dismissed as desperate drifts or mythical tales. They were the product of a sophisticated empirical science, an art of observation refined over generations. This deep, sustainable connection to the environment is perhaps the most vital lesson. Ancient cultures did not see the ocean as a hostile wilderness to be conquered, but as a complex, speaking partner to be understood. They listened to its language, and in return, it guided them home. This rediscovered genius challenges our modern arrogance. It asks us to consider what profound knowledge we have lost in our rush to dominate the world with technology, and what we might still learn from a past that was far more intelligent than we ever supposed. The ocean's greatest challenge is not the storm you can see, but the one that forms inside your own mind. This inner journey is the 20th step, a transformation that reshapes a crew from a group of skilled individuals into a single, intuitive organism. They begin to develop what old sailors called the seaman's eye, a profound, almost subconscious understanding of the sea and sky. It is more than just knowledge, it is a gut feeling, a sudden certainty that a change in the wind is coming, or that the vessel is drifting off course, felt through the soles of the feet long before it is confirmed by a star sight. This instinct is forged in the endless repetition of watch cycles, in the shared silence of 1,000 sunsets. Alongside this grows a deep, reverent respect for the ocean, a feeling many traditional cultures call tapu or sacred. It is the understanding that you are not a conqueror of this realm, but a guest within it. This respect dictates every action, from the way you handle food to the way you speak of the sea, a constant reminder of your own fragility against its immense power. Moments of doubt are an inevitable part of this psychological landscape. There are nights when the stars refuse to appear and the mind begins to whisper questions. Did we misread that last swell pattern? Are we sailing confidently into an endless void? These are the true tests of a navigator, not their skill with a camel, but their ability to hold onto a mental map when all external validation vanishes. The breakthroughs that follow are equally profound, a sudden, crystalline moment when all the disparate signs, the bird, the cloud, the feel of the water, snap into perfect alignment in the mind. This brings a surge of confidence that is both exhilarating and humbling. The final, profound sense of accomplishment is not just about reaching land. It is the quiet knowledge that you have faced your own limitations and learned to trust in a wisdom far older than yourself. This psychological dimension is the invisible compass that guided ancient explorers. It is the resilience to endure, the patience to wait for the signs, and the trust to follow a path you cannot see. To understand this human element is to finally grasp the full, breathtaking scope of what these early mariners truly achieved, not just with their hands but with their hearts and minds. No technology, ancient or modern, can erase the fundamental hardships of the sea. An honest look at the voyage reveals a tapestry of challenges where theory met the unyielding reality of the ocean. The most formidable enemy was often the weather, specifically the long, oppressive stretches of overcast that could last for days. When the clouds sealed the sky, the celestial map vanished entirely. The navigator was plunged into a world of grays, forced to rely solely on dead reckoning and the subtle language of the swells. This was a test of pure feel and memory, a nerve-wracking exercise in maintaining a course with no fixed points for validation. Every hour under the blank sky amplified the margin for error, the crew's position becoming less a known point and more a drifting circle of probability. Then there were the tools themselves. The very authenticity that gave the project its meaning also introduced profound fragility. A camel's string could fray and snap in a sudden squall. A critical length of the hand-braided coconut lashing, stressed by weeks of constant wave action, could begin to unravel. These were not simple breakdowns, they were crises. Every repair had to be executed with period-appropriate materials and techniques. A painstaking process of splicing rope by hand or recarving a wooden component with the few tools on board, all while the vessel continued to move through the water. The human body bore the brunt of the journey. The unrelenting diet of hardtack and dried fish, devoid of fresh greens, was a constant battle against malnutrition and the ever-present threat of scurvy. Sleep deprivation was engineered into the voyage by the watch system itself, a grinding cycle that eroded reserves of patience and sharpness. The crew existed in a state of perpetual dampness, their skin chafed by salt-soaked clothing, their muscles aching from the constant effort of balancing on a moving deck. Perhaps the most profound limitation, however, was an unspoken one, the invisible safety net of modern knowledge. While they used no modern tools for navigation, the crew could not erase their understanding of the world's size, the certainty that land existed where the charts said it did. This underlying confidence is a luxury no ancient explorer possessed. They sailed into a true unknown, where a miscalculation could lead not to a delayed rescue, but to a permanent vanishing. Acknowledging these struggles does not weaken the project's conclusions, it strengthens them. It shows precisely where the ancient methods were most vulnerable to error and where the human body was pushed to its absolute limits. These constraints help us move beyond a romanticized vision of the past, revealing the true, gritty texture of ancient exploration, a story not of perfect success, but of resilient problem-solving in the face of relentless adversity. The ocean's wisdom was a language spoken, not written. In cultures that navigated by the stars, the most vital library existed not on shelves, but in memory, passed from one generation to the next through song, story, and chant. The Starpaths and Shorelines project leans heavily on this living archive, often collaborating with the last elders who hold these precious fragments of a fading art. This knowledge is far more than a simple list of instructions. It is a complex system where navigational data is woven into the very fabric of culture. A single chant might encode the sequence of zenith stars for a journey to a distant island, while a story about an ancestral hero could secretly describe the specific swell patterns that wrap around a treacherous atoll. The rhythms of the songs mimic the rhythms of the ocean itself, helping the navigator internalize the feel of a long voyage. Learning this way is a deeply relational process. It is not about reading a textbook, but about sitting with a master for years, listening to the same stories repeated until their meaning unlocks in your mind, and feeling the ocean's motion as they describe it. The master does not just give answers, they pose riddles. They might point to a bird and ask, "Where does it sleep tonight, and how do you know?" This immersive mentorship builds a web of understanding that is both practical and spiritual, connecting the student to the sea, the sky, and the lineage of all who sailed before them. The tragic reality is that the silencing of these oral traditions represents an incalculable loss for all of humanity. When the last keeper of a star chant passes away without an apprentice, it is not just a song that is lost, but an entire atlas of the Pacific, a way of seeing the world that vanishes forever. This is why the project is as much an act of cultural rescue as it is one of historical exploration. By carefully recording these chants and sailing alongside these masters, the crew helps to reanimate a living library, proving that this knowledge is not a relic but a functional, brilliant science. The success of the entire endeavor hinges on this fragile chain of memory, a testament to the power of the human voice to carry the most complex maps across the centuries. The principles that guided ancient mariners across the trackless ocean now speak directly to the challenges of our own time. The core of their genius was not in complex machinery, but in a profound and sustainable connection to the environment, a skill built on patient observation and resourcefulness. In an era of climate change and ecological crisis, this deep awareness of natural systems offers a powerful alternative to our often extractive relationship with the planet. The ancient navigator did not simply use the ocean, they listened to it, understanding that their survival depended on a respectful partnership with the wind, waves, and stars. This model of careful stewardship, of taking only what is needed and reading the subtle signs of a changing world, is a lesson we desperately need to relearn. For descendant communities, this recovered knowledge is far more than a historical curiosity. It is a vital source of cultural identity and pride. Reconnecting with the voyaging traditions of their ancestors empowers a new generation, turning stories of past glory into a living, breathing heritage that shapes their future. The ripple effects of this ancient wisdom extend into surprising modern domains. While no one suggests tossing GPS units overboard, the art of celestial navigation is a crucial backup skill for any serious sailor, a self-reliant discipline that fosters a deeper understanding of one's place on the planet. It teaches problem-solving with limited tools and resilience when technology fails. This thinking even reaches into the final frontier, where astronauts training for long-duration space missions practice celestial navigation as a fundamental, non-digital method for determining their position, a direct link between the canoe and the capsule. The Starpaths and Shorelines project reveals that low-tech does not mean primitive. It can represent a highly sophisticated, resilient, and deeply human form of intelligence. In a world growing increasingly dependent on fragile digital grids, this ancient knowledge stands as a powerful reminder that some of our most reliable solutions are not found in the newest app, but in the oldest wisdom, offering a blueprint for building a future that is not just technologically advanced but also enduringly wise. A stubborn myth suggests ancient explorers were merely castaways, drifting on currents until they blindly stumbled upon new shores. The concrete data from our voyage shatters this idea completely. The ship's track, when compared against the ocean's flow, reveals a story of constant, deliberate correction. We were not passive riders on a river of water. We were active drivers on a star path, consistently adjusting our course to counter the push of currents that would have otherwise swept us far from our target. This was no accident. It was a calculated, navigated journey from one specific point to another, mirroring the precise colonization voyages that settled entire archipelagos. These were not desperate refugees. They were skilled professionals executing a well-established plan. Another persistent misconception paints these endeavors as impossibly dangerous one-off events, flukes of survival against all odds. Yet our successful round trip proves the opposite. The methods were not just viable for a single, lucky crossing. They were reliable enough to be used again and again. This repeatability is the hallmark of a mature technology, not a desperate gamble. Ancient trade routes, like those of the Phoenicians across the Mediterranean or the Polynesians across the Pacific, depended on this very consistency. Goods, people, and ideas flowed along these celestial highways for generations, a reality that would have been impossible if every voyage were a suicidal leap into the dark. Perhaps the most pervasive myth of all is the Eurocentric narrative that credits the so-called Age of Discovery with pioneering long-distance ocean travel. Our project, by rebuilding voyages that occurred thousands of years before European caravels set sail, directly challenges this. The evidence is written in the settlement patterns of the Pacific, in the archaeological finds of Lapita pottery scattered across islands, and in the oral histories that guided our own journey. Cultures across the globe had already mastered the greatest ocean long before European maps included the Americas. By setting the record straight with tangible proof, we do more than just correct a historical inaccuracy. We restore a legacy of genius to the cultures who first charted the world, giving credit where it has been overdue for centuries. This act of reclamation is not about the past alone, but about shaping a more complete and truthful understanding of human ingenuity for the future. This single voyage across the ocean has unlocked a new way of seeing history, and its wake points toward a horizon filled with other forgotten journeys. The success of the Starpaths and Shorelines project is not an ending, but a launchpad for a whole new era of experimental voyages. Imagine applying this same rigorous methodology to the vast treasure fleets of Ming Dynasty China, whose colossal ships once dwarfed European vessels as they sailed to the coast of Africa. We could build a replica of a majestic junk and test the historical accounts of their navigation techniques, perhaps using ancient Chinese star charts and magnetic compasses to trace their routes across the Indian Ocean. Or picture a project focused on the Arab Dhow traders who for centuries mastered the monsoon winds connecting Zanzibar to India. A replica Dhow, constructed from sewn planks and bearing a lateen sail, could attempt a crossing using only the navigational knowledge preserved in Arabic texts like the Kitab al-Fawaid, a medieval guide to the sea. Each new vessel would be a floating question posed to a different chapter of our global maritime past. Future voyages could push the boundaries of authenticity even further, moving beyond a single season to test how ancient mariners handled different times of year. How did a Viking crew cope with the winter darkness near the Arctic Circle? Could a Polynesian voyaging canoe safely navigate the stormier, less predictable conditions of the Pacific outside the calm trade wind season? These are not just adventures, they are critical scientific questions about the limits and flexibility of ancient seafaring. The potential for collaboration is equally vast. Future projects can deepen partnerships with indigenous communities, not as consultants but as co-leaders. This ensures cultural knowledge is not just borrowed, but revitalized and owned by the descendants of the original navigators, turning experimental archaeology into a powerful tool for cultural renewal. Technology will also play a quieter, smarter role. Imagine tiny, wireless sensors embedded in the hull to measure every strain, or non-intrusive biometric monitors that track the crew's sleep patterns and stress levels without a single interview, providing an unprecedented dataset on the human cost of these journeys. This growing field of experimental maritime archaeology is transforming how we engage with history, turning dusty manuscripts into living, breathing challenges. It proves that the past is not a static thing to be studied, but a dynamic, physical experience to be relived and re-understood. The journey of understanding, much like the ocean itself, has no final shore. The story of the ocean does not end when the credits roll. If this journey has ignited a spark of curiosity, you can follow the wake of the Starpaths and Shorelines project directly through its official website and documentary series, where the crew's full logs and video diaries are preserved. To dive deeper into the art of wayfinding, seek out the foundational texts, books like David Lewis's The Navigators, which deciphers the science behind Pacific Islander navigation, or the works of Ben Finney, who helped launch the modern voyaging renaissance. For a more immersive experience, many institutions offer pathways to hands-on learning. The Polynesian Voyaging Society, for instance, often welcomes volunteers and supporters for its ongoing educational missions aboard vessels like the Hokulea. Major maritime museums around the world frequently host weekend courses on celestial navigation, teaching you to use a sextant and understand the basic star compass. Your engagement can also take the form of vital support. Consider donating to organizations dedicated to cultural preservation, those working directly with indigenous elders to safeguard oral histories and navigational chants before they are lost forever. You can also contribute to university foundations that fund experimental archaeology, helping to launch the next great voyage of rediscovery. For those feeling a true call to the sea, look for workshops led by master navigators or volunteer opportunities with shipyards that build traditional replica vessels, where you can learn the feel of wood and rope. This is more than just a hobby, it is a way to become part of a living tradition, to help keep an ancient flame burning brightly. The greatest legacy of this project is not a single ship's track across the ocean, but the invitation it extends to every one of us to begin our own exploration, to look up at the night sky and see not just points of light, but a map waiting to be read. The wake of our voyage fades, but its meaning only grows clearer on the shore. The Starpaths and Shorelines journey stands as a lasting testament to human ingenuity and courage, a living proof that the greatest navigation tools are not held in the hand, but cultivated in the mind and spirit. We have traced the entire arc, from the first spark of an idea in a historian's notebook to the final, triumphant crunch of wood on sand, witnessing how ancient mariners transformed the terrifying emptiness of the open ocean into a familiar, navigable road. This project achieved far more than a simple recreation. It breathed life back into a lost art, rekindling a sense of profound wonder for what our ancestors could accomplish with nothing but observation, memory, and an unshakable trust in the natural world. It challenges each of us to look up at the night sky and no longer see just stars, but a grand, rotating map. It asks us to gaze out at the sea and perceive not a barrier, but a dynamic, speaking partner. Let this story be an invitation to uncover the hidden histories woven into your own landscape, to listen for the echoes of old wisdom in the world around you. These deep knowledge systems, forged through millennia of human experience, have fundamentally shaped our world, and their recovery is a gift we can all share. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary voyage of discovery. If this journey across time and tide has resonated with you, we welcome you to subscribe and join our next exploration into history's greatest mysteries.